Hello there and welcome back. Ignore the US, this video isn't about that, this video is about the Saab 9000. You don't even know why that's on the ramp. Unless I've released that video first, and then you do know why that's on the ramp. Unless I've released that video first and you haven't watched that video and you don't know what I'm about, I suggest you go back and watch all my videos, do the like, share and subscribe thing, and yeah, probably get sick of me, find somebody else to follow. Just to remind you what's going on, this is my Saab 9000 2-litre turbo 4-speed auto. Had it since 2019. At the end of 2020, the bottom end started rumbling. I suspect this engine's probably been run low on oil previously. I let it sit for a couple of years, or a year and a half, however long it's been, and now is time to get it back up and running. I've got hold of a spare engine of unknown history, but apparently a good runner, and I'm gonna drop the sump, which, well, I have done, you can work this out. I've dropped the sump, I've pulled the bearings out, I've inspected them, and the idea is to chuck some balance shaft delete kit in it, so I increase the oil pressure to the bottom end, and hopefully this engine lasts quite long. Quite long? Does that make sense? Sorry, I don't really mean good runner. It definitely wasn't sold to me as a good runner, it was sold to me as a running engine. It came out of a running car. So that's fine. What I find here, I'm not angry, I'm not upset. They're all 200,000 mile engines, so come on. So this is what I've found. A bit of sludge in the sump. Definitely not the worst one I've ever seen. And then these are the worst. So basically the thrust sides of the mains and the big ends. Yeah. So if you think conrod pushes down the top. Right, just trying to clear something up that I was trying to say yesterday but ended up rambling. On an engine, you've obviously got your piston, conrod, and your crankshaft, okay? So power forces the piston and conrod down. The crankshaft wants to resist that. So basically the top end of the big end bearing is the one that takes the most amount of load, as you can see in my picture. And then the bottom of the main bearing is trying to basically hold the crankshaft into the engine. So that again is the one that sees the most amount of load and wear. So when you're taking off your big end bearings, if you just pull off your big end cap, you'll see the bearings, you'll be like, oh, they're not too bad, but you're looking at the healthier side. You need to look at the other side before you make any decisions. On the mains, when you pull the cap off, you're looking at the least healthy bearing there. That's the one that's going to show the most amount of wear. Hope that clears that up. On with the show. So this is what we're looking at here. And I'm not sure if you know much about bearings, but you basically start off with soft white metal, and then underneath that you've got copper, brass, a red metal. And as you can see, some of these are, some of them have just worn through the white metal, but then they're starting to go down to the copper underneath. Copper, brass. Yeah, so that's a shame. But that's not horrendous, and this would have been a quiet engine, no doubt. Let me show you, the Scimitar suffered a blocked oil pickup a couple of years back, and that absolutely trashed the bottom end. Look at the bearings out of that. Ooh. So this is fine, the crank's fine, and I've got some new parts. Just going to take this time to say thanks to Nick at Griffin Performance Engines. He sorted me out with the parts, the balance shaft delete kit, and the bearings, crank seals. So big thanks to him. You can get hold of Nick at this email address, telephone number, address, and he's under Griffin Performance Engines on Facebook. I'm sure he won't mind being associated with a Russian van. Nick offers engine parts, the balance shaft delete kit, and full rebuild engines. Part rebuilt, full rebuilt. Check him out. You'll see the pretty stuff on his Facebook page. It doesn't look anything like my stuff. As you might have seen, there was only 4 mains there, but there's actually 5 mains fitted. Can't get the rear main out without removing the engine back plate, and I can't get it off because it's on the stand. So, time to adapt. No, you stay there. I'll come to you. Right, I've got an assortment of Saab O-rings, so I may as well take off the crossover pipe. I may have mentioned it before. If you're not familiar with Saab engines, very bizarre. The oil pump pumps in this way into the filter, out of the filter, into a pipe which goes to the other side of the crankshaft and then distributes all the oil that way. But there's an O-ring on each end of this pipe, and if that pipe isn't fitted or you've got the O-ring sort of letting oil pressure out, then you're in trouble. As tempted as I am just to ignore them and hope they're fine, I may as well have a look. Before I refit the pipe, I'm going to take some slack out of the timing chain and push the mains out. Basically, as the timing chain's tension, it's trying to pull this down. And it's difficult to get the bearings out. Show you what I'm doing. So I'm using a piece of plastic, happens to be a glue mixing stick. I'm using that to push, so I'm lifting the crank up and then I'm pushing the bearing down and round. Typical, this one wants to be stuck. So yeah, as I'm putting this on YouTube, I'm going to use something plastic and not a set of feeler gauges. You know, gotta pretend I know what I'm doing. There it is, out. Then, new one, I've got some of this assembly lube, basically like thick, sticky oil. Notice there's a tab there, and basically I can't push it around that way, I can only push it around that way, and the tab marries up with a notch in the bearing way, so stick some of this on. So the idea with this stuff, you don't want to start the engine with no oil in it. So obviously I'm going to crank it over on the starter a bit with the plugs out to build up oil pressure before I get it to start, but you still want, it's going to take a while for oil to get everywhere. So that's why we want some assembly fluid. There's the notch that the bearing lines up with, and it's the same all the way along. Just to show you the crank, no perceivable damage, score or marks. However, on all of them, see like this bizarre step-in type? No idea what it is, you can't even feel it. But I tell you what I am going to do, ignore it. I'm sure I don't need to say this disclaimer. I am not a professional, I don't really know what I'm doing. But yeah, feel free to tell me in the comments how much of an idiot I am. Bit of the special sticky. Have you ever seen Twin Town? That's filmed where I'm from. Look at the dashboard. So I read that cleanliness is really important when assembling engines. So this morning before I came down, I made sure I had a really thorough shower, brushed my teeth, flossed, and then had another shower then just to make sure. So I think I'm pretty good on that front. Right, just turned the engine over by hand. It's all nice and free. So now I'm going to pull the balance shaft chain off, pull the balance shaft out and fit that delete kit. So let me talk to you about balance shafts. This is one of the 2 balance shafts that's fitted to the engine. And as you can see, it's basically the weight is hanging off center. So as it rotates, it produces vibrations to counteract the main vibration of the engine. It's got 2 bearings, one at the rear and then the other is internal to this. It's got a sprocket, it's driven by a chain. This is mounted on the crankshaft, so you can see 2 to 1. This spins twice the RPM of the crankshaft. If you look at the side of the engine, bear in mind this engine's upside down, but that shouldn't change anything. You can see where the balance shaft lives, or one of. And then if you look at the front, these are where I've removed the balance shafts from. And if you look inside, you can see this is the front bearing, and the second bearing's at the back. And then all the way at the back there's a core plug, and it's the same on this side. This is where all the horrible oil has been living. I'll make sure to get all that out. So the idea is, with the balance shaft delete kit, you block up the 2 shiny, this area and the one behind it. There's an oil feed hole coming from there, and it also goes down there to feed this sprocket, which is no longer used. But once you block this hole up, you don't lose any oil there. And then on this side again, block up them 2 oil ways, drill, tap this hole, Loctite grub screw in there, and that's for the tensioner for the chain for the balance shaft, and then you no longer lose any pressure there. So this is what you get in the kit from Nick. Precision made plugs for the bearings, core plugs to block off the core plug, which I'm just about to knock out, and then the grub screw for the tensioner. One thing to note is the plug for the front bearing is wider and a larger diameter than the one for the rear bearing. Right, I'm going to knock this core plug out. I'm not showing off, but I reckon I can do this in one hit. Note to self, edit that to make it look like I've done it in one hit. Right, once that core plug's out, you've got to knock the standard bearing out. There's no bearings on the front because, like I showed you, they're integral to that rotating housing just behind the sprocket. So just the centre one. 32mm socket works well for this. Okay, so this is my overcomplicated insertion plan. Here's what I'm trying to fit. Unfortunately, what happens is as you knock it in, it tries to fall over. So I've got a 30mm socket which it happens to fit over. So this is going to guide it, and then I'm going to drift it in with this piece of aluminium stock I've got for the lathe. It's going to work perfectly. Right, that's looking good. Right, happy with that. You can see the distance between the bearing and the outer edge. This side, remember that. And same with this side. Even if it wasn't dead center, it's still going to block them oil galleries. The front one is much easier. You've got plenty of access. Core plug installation this side, and then this side is done. Right, I've done the other side without you. Sorry guys, I couldn't wait. Now to tap this to the tensioner hole. Now if you cover the tap in grease, you catch all the swarf. It's a mega powerful thread lock. And that ain't going nowhere. Double negative. Pulling the oil pump out just to have a quick look at it. I always feel this is a bit pointless because you can't actually get 9,000 oil pumps, but I'd feel bad if I put it back together and it was snapped in half. Or I may snap it in half getting it out this way. Probably not what the manual says. What bloody manual? Alright, sweet. Nothing I can do about that. Let's fit it back in. You can get hold of the 9.3 in them. New generation 900 oil pumps. They're like 30 quid, it's bugger all, but it's actually a different front cover on these 9,000 engines, and you can't get them. Minor scoring. Well, is it minor? I don't know. Got no option but to fit it. Right, I've just packed the pump with multi-purpose grease so it'll prime up nice and quick. Put a new crank seal on it. That fit this again. Jesus Christ. Oh, it's more like it. Right, so I'm about to put the front cover back on. Before I fit the front cover, I'm going to pull the pressure relief valve out to make sure it's not sticking. And I thought I'd explain as I went along what a pressure relief valve done. No doubt lots of people know, but I thought I'd explain it anyway, just in case. So I've drawn a quick diagram. So this is your sump with your oil in it. This is your pickup. This is your pump, filter, oil ways through to the bearings, and that's clearly a Conrod crankshaft. It's self-explanatory. It's a pretty good diagram. So what you also have in this setup is a PRV, pressure relief valve. And what that does is that because an engine operates from like 800 RPM all the way up to 6,000 RPM plus, and you need oil pressure from 800 RPM all the way up to 6,000 RPM, what you do, or what the manufacturer does, is the oil pump is driven at the crank speed. So at slow RPM, it's got enough capacity to flow a decent amount of fluid. So say 30 psi at idle. Well, if it's doing that at 800 RPM, by the time you get to 6,000 RPM, you're going to be making like 140 psi, and it's going to be trying to splurge it out of all the seals. It's going to be too much pressure. So what they fit is a pressure relief valve, and it's basically a spring with a little like ball bearing or valve in it. And that spring is got a set tension on it. And what happens is that when the pressure gets to say 50, 60 psi, that ball basically de-seats, and it allows oil pressure to drain back down into the sump, so you're not forcing too much pressure around the system. Now the problem with that is that if it sticks in any orientation, it's going to be a problem. If it's stuck in the closed position, like I say, you're going to be trying to make 140 psi of oil pressure, and it's going to be trying to push it out all the seals. If it's stuck in the open position, at idle, it's going to be making bugger all pressure, because at 800 RPM, it's just going to be dumping whatever little oil flow it's got back into the sump. You can get adjustable ones of them, and you can also cheat and stretch the spring, put shims behind the spring, and put stiffer springs in to basically try and cheat and bring your oil pressure up. I've always wondered with the Saab engines though, because they don't make brilliant oil pressure, I wonder if that pressure relief valve ever gets to the point where it's actually opening. So that'd be something interesting that I wouldn't mind finding out one day. Maybe put like a micro switch on it somehow to see if it does open. But what I'm going to do for now is just pull it out, clean it up, make sure it's all good and works about sticking, and then that front cover can go back on. So this is the back side of the oil pump, the front cover with the oil pump in it. Here's the oil pump, here's the oil pickup, and here is the feed out to the oil galleries, and then in here is where you have that setup, that pressure relief valve. Little piston with a big spring. Now I said once it deseats, the pressure drops down back into the sump, but actually you can see on this one, it actually drops back into the low pressure side of the pump. So you can see this is the low side, which picks up the oil, rotates them, that's the pressure side going out. And you can see the gallery out, and then you can see the pressure relief valve, and then that would allow the oil to go back into the low side of the pump, so it would basically circulate it. This is all, they all seem to have very minor scratches on them. But yeah, it came out easily, it seems to be smooth to operate, so yeah, back in it goes. So I'm just about to chuck the front cover back on. Make sure, even once you've ditched the balance shaft stuff, put that sprocket back on, put your oil pump drive on. And I don't know if this is needed, but where the old balance shaft tensioner is, this can kind of move. So I turned this down a bit and I'm putting it back on. This is the remainder of, this is the pivot point of the old balance shaft tensioner. Chuck in a few extra, some of the bolts that you removed, clean it up, chuck some special Loctite on it and then bolt it up. I've covered it in other videos, but the Loctite to use is this Loctite 518. Right, I'm going to get the engine back on the stand, flip the engine over, clean around inside the block with a bit of compressed air so all the crap falls out, there's no doubt settled in there, and then clean the sump up and fit it. Right, just going to pull this sump apart. Right, there's an O-ring on this here. Happy with that? That is in reality absolutely bugger all. When I killed my scimitar years ago, that was packed, like with dark, black, thick oil. Well, dried up oil. Looked almost like plastic. But yeah, that'd be nice and easy to clean up. Happy days. Sump's all cleaned up, new O-ring on the pickup. Right, that's it. This engine is all back in one piece. Next steps are going to be remove the 9000 engine and dress over any accessories that I'm missing. But that'll be another video because this has gone on long enough. So, thanks for watching. Catch you next time.